Our City Council work meeting today. We've got a lot to get through, so I'd like to get going. We're going to start. Is there any council business we need to address? No? Okay, so that was item 1. Item 2, which is the bulk of our agenda. 2.1, legislative session wrap-up. Tammy?
Yes, and hopefully we won't take that long because I know that there's a bunch of things to touch on. So I tried to cover most of the updates just in your staff report, but there will be a few additional items that we will have our lobbyist Chris Blake touch on, and then I'd like the departments to touch on some of the measures that they're taking to address some of the items that came up during the session. This session was actually a record breaker for bill tracking. I believe the league tracked over 300 bills that could directly impact municipalities. And the underlying theme of the session appeared to be local controls and affordable housing, but local controls. So we could probably spend hours reviewing everything that was discussed in the session, but instead, we're going to have Chris.
I'm right here. I snuck up the table. So.
We're going to have Chris touch on the overall session, and then as well as give a briefing on some of the bills with the largest and most significant impacts. And then after that, we'll speak with our directors on ways that they're tackling some of these issues. So, if you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tammy. And once again, it's a great opportunity to honor to represent Herriman. I'll touch on some high-level sort of bills. I think, as Tammy pointed out, a couple things I just want to note. One is you definitely had, there's always a tension, if you will, between state government and local government, and that tension plays out in different ways every year. But there was definitely I don't want to call it attack, that sounds way too strong, but an emphasis on taking back some of the local control. And you see this reflected in a couple of different ways. I think that you definitely see this as a result of a number of developers in the legislature who have interactions with the cities and frustrations with the cities. That's probably where you have specific cities sort of causing all cities a problem, if you will. So you definitely see some of the impact from there. But then you also see sort of this economic development push. We see this with the Utah Inland Port. We're seeing it in Draper around the prison property, but I think in a very different way. But you're seeing some of these focuses on, how should the state and the cities work together over areas of importance, whether that be an idea like the Inland Port, whether that be a big chunk of ground like we have at the prison property. But you see some interesting dynamics playing out there. I would suggest that the approach that we've taken on Point of the Mountain is probably a better template, and had Salt Lake City followed that, they may not be in the situation they are. Admittedly, Salt Lake City suffers from some issues just because there are political dynamics that are different than the state as a whole, but maybe some things there. Also, this session was incredible for transportation, and that was a little bit of a surprise. So let me touch on a couple of key issues. The biggest issue, and we certainly knew that Senate Bill 136, this is the Transportation Governance Bill, largely deals with UTA, but is much more vast and far-reaching than just the changes that it makes to UTA governance. So as we came into the session, we knew that it would hopefully do a couple of things. It would reform UTA, and make some significant changes there, make some changes in land use and as it relates to prioritization. But the House sponsor, Representative Schultz, was suggesting that he might wanted to go a lot further than we ended up going. I think we ended up in a pretty good place there. But then it also created some revenues for cities, for transit, that were a little bit unexpected. So just from a high level, changes UTA will have full-time commissioners, I think they're calling them officially, that will oversee UTA. Number of changes that will happen within UTA. There will remain a local advisory board, which has not insignificant powers, and I think will be an important component to making sure that UTA is well connected and synchronized with the cities. Salt Lake County has Salt Lake County as a whole, not necessarily the county itself. I think those 3 members are appointed by the COG, but those 3 members are Salt Lake County representatives, I'll say it that way. And that'll be an important component. And then one of the commissioners will be appointed by the Salt Lake mayor, and there hopefully will be some consultation. I suspect that there will be, but then those persons will ultimately be appointed by the governor. And so that'll be kind of an interesting development as we see there. More importantly, in my mind, the bill changes, makes a couple of changes as it relates to transit funding. It creates what they're calling the TTIF. So we now have the Transportation Investment Fund. This is the money that goes towards planning and building our large-scale projects here in the state of Utah. The TTIF, the Transportation Investment Fund, will go towards building capital projects within the state. The positive for this, and I think the way that we should be looking at this is there were no capital funds for transit for a number of years. I mean, UTA, there's been a lot of talk about how much they've bonded. UTA is bonded to the hilt. There's no ability for them to do additional capital projects. And so this new TTIF was funded with some ongoing general sales tax dollars that's put in there. That's a growing pot of money. In addition to that, they gave a 5th quarter, although not a full sales tax quarter, a 0.20, gave an additional quarter if the 4 quarters are imposed. So let me explain what that means. Right now we have essentially 3 quarters, 3 sales tax quarters imposed in Salt Lake County. The 4th quarter, what we affectionately refer to as Prop 1, that failed in the 2016 election, needs to be imposed before this 5th quarter can be imposed. So the 4th quarter, or the Prop 1 quarter, can be imposed one of 2 ways: by referendum or by action of the county legislative body. They have to impose that by June of 2020, or the cities can then impose that quarter on their own. And so that's a significant, really kind of puts a significant hammer towards the counties and their ability to be able to impose that and take their split of the money.
Okay, what's the deadline to impose that by the county?
The county has to impose it by June of 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
So does the county seem likely to do that? Because, whoever does it gets the political heat of it.
But they also get the money.
Well,
Correct.
they get to decide how the money is disseminated.
Well, so the 4th quarter, or the Prop 1 quarter, the 4th quarter gets imposed 0.1 to the cities, 0.1 to UTA, and 0.05 to the county.
No matter who imposes it.
No, only if the county imposes that. So that's the current allocation of that 4th quarter. And so if the county wants their 0.05, they have to impose that by June of 2020. Now the legislature did put a sweetener in and say that if they impose it, they get the full quarter till June of 2019. So they would get a big chunk of money, and then it would go to that original allocation. And the reason for that sweetener is to say, impose it or lose it. And so that's kind of how that dynamic works.
Imposing versus this little city.
Correct. So if we get to June of 2020 and Salt Lake County either has not voted on it or has not imposed it, the city can then impose it. They would impose the 0.25. 0.125 would go to the city, and 0.125 would go to transit or to UTA. So, frankly, the county's going to have to do it. And how they do it and their timing, there's going to be political considerations and all of that. But yes, my guess is that they will ultimately impose that. Then, if they impose all 4 quarters, they can then impose this 5th quarter, which is a 0.20, which all goes to the county but has to be spent on transit-specific projects. And so some of these dynamics, may even change in future legislative sessions. All of these quarters, the county and the cities lose their ability to impose them by June of 2022. And so they're definitely putting the pressure on the counties and the cities to say, impose this and put it to use, or lose it. And maybe the state can do. There were some earlier iterations where the state would impose those quarters themselves and put that into the TTIF. That fell away. But I think at the end of the day, these quarters at some level are going to be imposed, but that's kind of the dynamic that's playing out there. So that's 136. Let me just note that it also has some changes that land use and economic development are used as part of the transportation prioritization criteria. That has always been kind of an early component and then gets lost when you actually do the prioritization. I think this is a place where Herriman will do really well, but I recognize some of these issues are a little bit of a rub in terms of the economic development, some of the planning criteria, how that gets utilized. I know that can be an issue with citizens in terms of some of those dynamics as it relates to density and some of those things, but there were some components added in there for the transportation prioritization process.
And if you guys are interested, the Wasatch Front Regional Council gave an entire brief on
and it's
this Senate
fantastic.
bill, and it's really good and it goes into the details. So I can make you guys all a copy if you didn't receive it, and then that way you'll have it if you want to go through it with a little more detail.
A lot more detail in there than I can give. Or would you'd want me to give tonight. Senate Bill 71 was a bill that Senator Niederhauser ran, President Niederhauser, who's stepping down. This deals with tolling, allows UDOT to toll existing, newer, expanding roads. The reason I wanted to mention this is, just as we've talked about Butterfield Canyon over the years and some of these things, at least another tool in the toolbox that we can consider. Obviously, this has been an issue of contention, tolling generally on the west side. The feeling like, the east side, oh, we built all your roads got built, now let's toll the heck out of the west side. And so I think that's a fair concern and dynamic. I don't think that's UDOT's goal, but something that we're definitely going to have to pay attention to.
Originally, this bill was just for new capacity. And it wasn't until the substitute that they said existing as well, so at least they kind of moved it back in that.
Yeah, I thought it, Mayor, I'd have to double check that. I thought it was existing, and the reason I say I thought it was existing is because one of the goals of this is to look at tolling the Cottonwood Canyons. And so where those are existing roads, I would suspect that that's part of it, but it may not have originally said that and was changed to say that. But that is certainly a component of President Niederhauser. President Niederhauser was laser focused on the issue of let's get the sales tax that we have dedicated to transportation, which right now is to the tune of $600 million coming out of the state budget and going into transportation. We need to focus more of the user fees, whether that's gas tax, whether that's road user charges, whether that's tolling, other maybe suggestions there. We need to get those focused on how we're subsidizing and paying for our roads, rather than this general fund sales tax. So that leads to point number 3. HGR 20 is part of this Our Schools Now tax package that you may have heard about. There's a whole property tax component. I won't necessarily go into that today unless you want me to. Some interesting things there, and frankly, I'm shocked the legislature passed some of this. I suspected last night in my Republican caucus that I would hear a lot more about it, sort of some angst over the increases in taxes or raising of taxes. I didn't, so I don't know what that means, and maybe it won't be as big an issue as I thought. But we will be voting on a 10-cent gas tax increase at the ballot this year. That would raise roughly $160 million, but that will be split on the 70-30 BNC road fund that we're accustomed to. And so if that were to pass, that would be roughly, what would that be, $40 million going into the BNC road fund. So pretty significant potential bump and increase there. I certainly will think that there will be some groups that will be advocating for that pretty hard and pushing on it from the perspective of, if you pass this, it allows the state to shift more money into public education. And so I think that's going to be an interesting campaign to watch as we go along. Let me mention one other bill that deals specifically with transportation this year. Senate Bill 120, this was run by Senator Henderson. There are a couple of cities, and Provo I think is probably the most significant, that imposes a municipal transportation utility fee. And Provo put this into place without a lot of fanfare. I mean, they put this in a number of years ago. I actually thought it might be a bigger issue. It never really has been the issue at the legislature I thought it would be. Their thinking was, in Provo you have a big institution that doesn't pay any property tax and yet has a big impact on their roads. And they wanted to look at ways that they could spread some of that joy and pain across all of their taxpayers or all of their citizens. And so they came up with this municipal utility fee. The legislature essentially sanctioned it this year, but did put some restrictions around who can't be charged, and that really goes towards the counties. I don't know if that was a significant issue in Provo, that county facilities were being charged, but they specifically exempted those kind of entities, but have essentially sanctioned it. And so I don't know if that's something that Herriman ever wants to look at or would consider, but just something I'd note that now sort of has a little bit more of a green light than maybe it even had before. Any questions on any of the transportation stuff there? Okay. House Bill 259, this dealt with moderate income housing. Representative Weil requires a city with a population of at least 5,000 to have a moderate income housing element in their general plan, and outlines some program zoning and planning that should be considered. I'm sure your folks have started to look at this, and you'll be having some discussions on this. I think that's a place where, once again, I think Herriman has a pretty good story to tell here, but something that at some level, some of these components have been mandated and are going to become an issue as it relates to housing affordability and things that you guys are going to have to tackle and deal with even more so than you have today. Our Sentinel Landscape Bill passed really easily. Representative Notwell did a great job on that bill and some positives there. Another issue that I just wanted to raise, Senator Andrade, who represents a little part of Herriman, ran a bill dealing with secondary water metering. Do we have metering on all of our secondary water? I've already mentioned this then. I think they're going to require that here in the not too distant future. So the fact that we are already there, I couldn't remember if we were or not, maybe isn't an issue that we need to be as concerned about. And then the other bill I'll just mention that did not pass, and I know Mayor and I talked about this, House Bill 376, this was Representative McKay's bill dealing with the interlocal UPD, did not pass, kind of fell victim to some timing issues, and so I think this is a bill that I know will need to be revisited here. Representative McKay was frustrated that this didn't pass. What happened is it got pulled off the consent calendar, and then by the time they could get it back on, there just wasn't enough time to have it considered. So something that we'll need to look at as we go forward. Let's see. I think there was one other I wanted to mention. Oh, there were some bills. Let me just mention there were some bills dealing with kind of extraterritorial jurisdiction. A number of different issues there that are kind of some interesting dynamics, including the legislature wanting to have what was considered kind of an oversight committee that, depending on how you looked at it, was really onerous. That ultimately did not pass. Representative Coleman had some bills dealing with this in terms of citing, if you have property in another city. Her specific concern has always been around the airport. Salt Lake City, which owns the airport, also owns airport number 2, which sits in the middle of West Jordan. And so I think there will be some ongoing issues there. I don't know that that's a huge issue for us, but this sort of general idea of, oversight and some of these issues was definitely prevalent at the legislature this year, and something that we'll need to be mindful of and probably have discussions with our elected officials as we move forward. So, anything else you wanted me to touch on? Am I missing something?
Small wireless.
Oh, yeah, small cell.
Small cell tower.
Yeah, small cell. This is a bill that Senator Bramble ran, and I generally, the League of Cities and Towns has a really difficult job. I give them a ton of credit for the way that they dealt with the wireless industry on this bill. They stayed at the table and really worked through this. But the goal here, or the thought, is really around what they're calling small cell. This is enhanced wireless, for lack of a better word. I don't think this will be a huge issue for Herriman in the near future. Maybe out at I guess we're calling it the Zebra facility, but out at Zebra, this is really focused on getting additional wireless nodes in areas of high congestion. And the ability for the wireless to build a site and put these things up in a sort of reasonable time frame. Now, it does impact the city's ability to dictate some of the zoning and some of the fees that are associated with this. And so there are some infringements from that perspective. But this is not big cell towers as we've been accustomed to thinking of these things. These are smaller devices that are fitted on utility poles, which which we don't have.
That's the problem.
We have light poles
That is
and
gonna
we
be the
have
problem.
semaphore poles.
Right,
Yeah.
well, and what it
Yeah.
stated,
And they're
I
not little, they're
believe,
quite ugly.
They're quite
Are they?
large.
yes, is that if you don't allow them to put it on one of your existing poles, you cannot prevent them from putting up their own pole. There are some exceptions where you can do reasonable guidelines.
Yeah.
But it's not clear what those are,
And I think this is a point of, it's gonna have to be, discussed as we move forward, and something that we'll wanna look to in the interim. Like I said, I don't think this is, Herriman is going to be the proving ground, unless you correct me if I'm wrong, John, are they putting an application in out here? I think the place they're looking are, those sort of high density areas,
That
within
may
the
give us
city,
some
so.
time, but I still think we need to prepare for it.
Yeah, that's fair, yeah,
They've
absolutely.
already been in talks with Sandy. Sandy actually has a policy that we probably could do.
We've got a copy of that, and we've been looking at it already.
Yeah, cause we went through extensive work and effort.
Extensive, and underline that word, it was extensive,
Yeah, it's good.
yeah.
We need some cell towers. The too many areas in the city, you can't get reception.
Which,
Okay,
yeah.
do you guys have any more questions for Chris, or can we move on to letting some of the departments touch on some of the items that impacted them? Okay, so let's start with you, Blake.
All right, I just have a list here. I'll hit the ones that are most important to me. Well, I guess for Catherine and I, we have the HB 250, the building permit impact fee amendments. It more impacts the building department with their plan review time, and if they don't review them quick enough, they're automatically approved.
Are you talking about 250 or 346?
250. And then it also has a part in it that talks about,
Question on that, they're automatically approved as long as they have an engineered
it
stamp
has
on
to be an engineered stamp, yes.
Right.
And then the other side of that is planning and engineering have to prove that there was a review done and that they were approved for, and it has a list of things like curb and gutter elevations, a few other things, which is part of our engineering process. It's not gonna change anything on our side really, but it's more pressure on the building department.
This doesn't prevent us from denying stuff, it just says we have to get the process.
Yeah, it doesn't prevent you from denying it, but your review time just gets spelled.
Approve or keep working through to approve, they don't have unless there's a zoning or
The
planning.
part that has me concerned is it keeps encroaching down into the engineering and planning side of it, so eventually they're gonna move into saying, we have a certain time to review things that's gonna crunch our time.
Well, and the point Chris made is the whole reason this bill was there was for one or two bad actors. By and
Right.
large, the league looked at the data, by and large, the cities were within the time frame as outlined by the bill. So there really is no need for a bill, it was just simply work through the bad actor cities, but as usual, you get a bill that's a one size fits all that's unnecessary.
They're punishing all for the transgressions of a few. Yep.
I understand too that if an applicant exercises their right to begin construction prior to city approval, that essentially the architect or the engineer that stamped the plans assumes liability.
Yes.
So there was some question about how comfortable those professionals will be at assuming that liability.
I think there's more to come on
Yeah.
this bill, or this amendment in the future. The next one I have is fire code amendments. The fire code got dialed back a little bit, and they're allowing building permits without asphalt down. That's now state statute. I've worked with some of the other cities, and we're looking at changing our standard. Instead of the 3 inches of asphalt that we typically have on local roads, we're gonna have them put a sacrificial 3 inches of road base down to protect that base. And so we'll be bringing that amendment to the standards back to you soon for that. South Jordan's already adopted one similar to that. So that's our concern with just protecting the existing, or the road base they put in, so that we get good roads at the end of the project.
And the point on that too is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Blake, but part of that is that they're required, especially during the winter months, they're required to maintain that. And if they don't maintain it, that gives us the ability to shut them down. But through the maintaining, then we risk damaging that underlying.
So that's where
Road
this 3
base.
inches of asphalt
Absolutely.
comes in, protects the lip of the gutter and that underlying road base. It really puts a lot of pressure onto the fire marshal to come in and red tag the projects if they're not towing the line, I guess, on it. 377, I don't have much on that one.
Do you have anything on that one, Michael? 377 with the land use?
I just had notes saying that it clarified the administrative and legislative actions, what that means. And there's some minor land use amendments, so we'll review that, for consistency with our code.
Okay. And then Wendy, fireworks and food trucks.
Woohoo, all the fun stuff, right? So they did scale back some of the firework restrictions. Riley Pilgrim is working on that. We'll bring that back to you and just identifying the open space, parks, trails, any other hazardous areas in the city where we don't want people shooting fireworks off to mitigate any fires that we don't need to have this summer. Any questions on that one? That'll be coming back to you with Chief Pilgrim.
And the days are tightened up.
Yes. They reduced them to, yeah,
Around each holiday.
July 2nd to July 5th are the dates for the 4th, and July 22nd to the 25th for the 24th.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I can't hear you.
Sure, July 2nd to the 5th for the 4th, and July 22nd to the 25th for the 24th. And beginning at 11 a.m. on December 31st and ending at 1 a.m. on New Year's Day. And then that can change if it's on a Sunday or, those kind of things. So I know that Riley's been working on a map, so we'll bring that back to you when it's ready. And then food vendors, which I promise we just finished this last fall. We'll now have to come back to you as well. I'm sure that Brandon and Sandra will be working on the revisions that we need to make in our ordinance to meet the new state statute. So we're limited as to where we can prohibit them to operate now, so we'll be bringing that back to you as well.
You can pretty much go anywhere now. So if your neighborhood wants to have a big food truck party.
Wouldn't they need a permit though to close the road tomorrow?
If they're closing the roads, but if they're just parked on the side of the road and it's not in a parking permit area, then. Do you have anything other than the?
There was a couple, the secondary one that Chris mentioned obviously failed, but that wouldn't necessarily impact us much at all anyways. There was one that regarded water holdings, it was supplying water outside of your city boundaries. That one failed, but I see it coming back again. It just requires us to do mapping and then make that information public so the residents know that we're actually supplying the water outside. It just requires us to supply certain information as far as how much water we're selling them, how many connections we're serving.
Was that a Coleman bill too?
No, that was Sandals bill. Good, correct? I think. Yeah.
The other one is on water conservation. It's just requiring us to add secondary to our water conservation plan. This one failed as well, but I see it coming back again. It's nothing serious. It's just they want us to add secondary water to the conservation plans just to make sure we're trying to follow and implement conservation on the secondary side as well. Those are the real big ones. There's a few others that failed, but they don't really pertain to us really. So water rights stuff, but that doesn't really pertain to us as far as what we're dealing with water rights. So that's really it.
Okay, Chief, Public Safety.
So quotas, which we don't have and we won't have. Basically what that bill does is it addresses percentages and numbers. So we can't send officers out to write a certain amount of tickets or a certain percentage or have that tied to any sort of performance evaluation form. And for us, it doesn't really matter, so we don't do that. Secondary employment, we're still trying to find our way through that. There were a couple bills that ran about that. Basically what that is part-time employment for police officers. The big push is to, and correct me if I'm wrong, the big push is to get that more towards a private security company or to fully cost law enforcement for cars and those kind of things. Does that about encapsulate that? We're still trying to work our way through it. It does have some implications on workman's comp and those kind of things. So if we're doing jobs that are city-based and as part of our employment for overtime, it wouldn't necessarily matter because you're paying into that anyway. If we begin to do jobs outside of that for events, this one would probably matter. So we don't see a huge impact there. The Dingo and Aldo bill for K9 to increase that to secondary felony passed, and I know that's been signed by the governor, so that's lots of secondary felony now versus a third. They wanted that reverted to the Sentencing Commission to look at it because they thought it was a little steep, but law enforcement was all on board with that. And then finally, we had a fraud paraphernalia law that that UPD also ran. Basically what that says is if you're caught with implements of fraud, that it's a crime. So if you have things that make licenses and checks and those kind of things, which are crime. I don't know if that's been assigned to you.
To be honest, I don't know, I can check, but no.
I think it's on the governor's desk, I don't know if it's gone through the signature process, but that's actually a very good law for us, so that, because we oftentimes find those guys that have that kind of equipment, but we don't have any way to charge them with it, so that's about, those are the big four for us this year.
Okay, so do you guys have any other questions, or are there any additional bills that you would like any of us to touch on? And I'll get you guys a copy of this brief on 116.
Tammy, you address the home occupation business license.
That was, let's see.
Yeah, that was Andrew.
That one was Andrew Riggs, and it
Doesn't allow us to.
it's in their packet, yeah, that talks about it's not required, the home-based business license that is not required and the home-based business owner must be notified of exemption, is that right? Is that the one that you're talking about? I don't know which one you're talking about.
But it also said that if they request a license, we can charge them.
We can charge them, yes, if they request it, then we can charge them a fee, but we do need to notify, them of the exemption if,
So
we
may
need to notify them that it's not required. And then there was another bill that could impact them that I wanted to ask you about, but Alicia was going to look into it and I haven't heard back from her. So.
That was the only one I heard, SB 158, yeah.
Homeless shelter.
Homeless
The
shelter.
homeless shelter. Sean can talk on the homeless shelter.
We just
Only
lost,
John over there.
we just lost about $200,000.
It's just another way for the state to get our money.
Tammy, I was gonna also talk about the trail money too.
Okay.
So, we had an appropriation bill to get some trail money by right away up the mountains. It was tied with, some money the city was gonna get. And, Dimple. And, they were gonna get more money than we were gonna get, but we were about at 1.2 million. And then, kind of the night before the legislation closed, a bunch of leadership got together. Sandy lost a bunch of money. I guess their group business. Anyway. And then we lost some money, so we only got about $500,000, which is good. And Wendy over there is going to do a presentation next week on what we think we have to be fine with that. So,
It's looking good for.
So we got a third of what we were going to get.
yeah,
Like you said.
We was going for 1.2 and it's looking good until that last week.
we're happy, we're excited.
But if you want
And this
to
will
know
help.
for Sandy too, so.
We watched Sandy lose $2 million.
And there's no transportation so far. We're still holding.
That's all I'm gonna say. And Wendy will have some great ideas too.
Is that it? Alright, thank you very much. Legislative season is always a fun time, and we appreciate all the work that our staff does to help us be as effective as possible.
We're working with Chris during the off season, is that what we call this? Anyway, about transportation, a number of issues.
He's actually year round, Chris.
Yeah, but we're starting up already some ideas to work on some things for next season to.
Anybody knows it's fall, everything's this January, it's really not. When you're involved, it starts almost the day after working on next year's project, so.
Well, and we've been given a heads up that we might be looking at several retirements this year. And
Well,
so
I would just say, speaking of Sandy made their, their gold when they had important people in the legislature, and We have Representative John Notwell is increasing in influence and likely moving up in leadership. And so I would say now's the time for us to mount up on Representative Notwell and write him. So I know this meeting's being recorded and taped, and so John's there, hi, but I mean that in a good way. I mean, John's a...
What I heard was that he's a fantastic partner to our city, and we're glad.
That's exactly what I said. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. We'll go ahead and move on. Item 2.2, review of capital project priorities. Blake.
Okay. Actually, you're first, I'm first. So this presentation will look very familiar because it's basically the same one you've already heard.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
I'll get as far away from the camera as I can. Okay, so. Is it working, Alan? Is it on?
Switch.
Turn it on.
It's got batteries. Maybe if you shake it. Bang it across the table a couple times.
I got a pointer, so can I hot your shot? There you go. Is that me?
Yeah, is that you?
I don't know. Okay, so the first ones are the water projects, and I haven't changed anything from the last presentation. So these are the projects that will be going on the budget for the one that you'll be voting for. Alan's got the schedule in May or June. It'll start in July. So are there any questions on any of the water projects? I can get to the last slide. It's the key one that talks about the money. Going as fast as I can. Okay. So, is there anything you want to talk about on your list?
No, if you had any questions there.
These are all culinary.
That's all the culinary projects.
Yeah, those are all the culinary projects. And the majority of these are tied to either projects the city is doing or projects that are relate directly to development that's happening. So as these developments happen, obviously all that money won't be expended this year. A lot of them will get paid back as impact fees are collected and those things, but we've just budgeted for them because, you know, if all the impact fees come in, we have to pay them back. But so there's really nothing up there that's not currently in the works, either now or we propose will happen development-wise coming up.
So keep moving on. Secondary projects, same story. Nothing has changed since the last presentation.
I do have a question about these. So just my recollection, I brought this up with Brett, got me a little bit of information, but previous council, I remember us talking about a potential second reservoir. And the last conversation I remember was it wasn't gonna happen. It wasn't gonna work, it wasn't there, but now we've got over $4 million on here for the next 2 budget years for a reservoir.
It's not the reservoir we was talking about, there was a big reservoir.
Yeah, so we'll still need a reservoir, but it's not going to be built for recreation. It's going to be built solely for irrigation. So the initial discussion was to try and tie those two together, kind of like a Black Ridge again, but we still need storage.
Kind of, not like.
Okay. Similar to
in Juniper Canyon, but
in Juniper Canyon. So yes, we still need reservoirs for storage.
Today it's pretty cost prohibitive.
But they're much smaller.
Yeah, so it'll be built only to the size that's needed. It's that one that's in Juniper Canyon is about 3 million gallons. The initial discussion when we brought it to you a couple of years ago, or it was last year, I think, we were talking about a large reservoir so that we could do recreation and those types of things, but we've scaled it back.
Councilman Anderson, you are right. We did scrub the big one, but we did talk about the plan B was, okay, well, we need some storage capacity in that area.
So this is storage just for us?
Yes, this will be strictly for him.
Everything basically, I think down Juniper Canyon, it's the RSL area, all that through there, it will be secondary. RSL will be pumping out the canal, so I should say zero will.
I just want to make sure usually think I have a fairly good memory.
No, you have a good, but all the households down there and the parks and stuff, you have that secondary water off a small.
Wasn't there
And we've gone back and forth from an enclosed storage facility to an open one. It was definitely very cost effective. Does bring up other issues, but that'll be Justin's problem.
But there was a gravity issue too. It wasn't solely funding that had us reduce that, wasn't it just the
There's a problem with
inability
the
to?
location.
Yeah.
As far as the elevation wise, pressure, so to try and use it for both recreation and for secondary storage would be difficult to fit that large of a reservoir in the area needed, so that was one of the other issues too.
So no boat ramps and.
Well,
So
I do
what-
think it's important though to note the reasons because we messaged out to the residents a lot that their troubles at Black Ridge would be alleviated by a second reservoir. So I do want it to be clear as to the why we can't, because we made promises that we would.
Yeah, and we're not saying we just can't today. It's not it's still on our radar possibly in the future, but it's just so costly to build that dam. It's just, wow, it's off the chart.
And we'll have future reservoirs in northwest Herriman as well, which might be conducive to one of those types of sites.
Dams aren't as big. This dam down here would be like 65 feet tall. And you're talking about significant, you're talking about a $15 million bill.
Yeah, and that's a good reason not to build it. I mean, I don't think our taxpayers would think that's a wise use of taxpayer dollar. I just wanna make sure that we're communicating that.
And just, if you wouldn't mind, Justin, just remind us the location here, what's surrounding it.
So obviously there's a lot more development happening. That's not right. So in the area where this reservoir will be, the reservoir is planned to be about where that blue dot is, somewhere in there, if I can touch still. But now you have there's increased housing that's moving down in this area. So there's a school here. We are planning to have somewhat of a trailhead here. We purchased that 5 acres of Molcott property last year to use as a trailhead. The tank or the reservoir, whichever we decide, will be in that location. It'll be down in the drainage area, but it'll be in the location of those facilities.
How much actual land area does it take up? Because my understanding this is open space that we're using for this, right?
It won't take up, obviously a storage tank, a concrete storage tank will take up less space than the reservoir. Because they're more efficient space-wise, but they're a little more costly. An open reservoir, for 3 million gallons, it wouldn't take much more than, I would guess, an acre and a half maybe, depending on the depth. Just to kind of give you a comparison, Black Ridge is 20 million gallons and its area is about 5 acres. So,
And part of our concern, even if we do open an acre of water, it will have people in it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it. We'll come back to you when that happens. We want to fence it, we want to do those things, so those are things we'll bring back. And the same thing with most of these projects the impact fee related projects are due to development or city projects, the roadways the city are doing, we're installing those as well at that time. So kind of the same thing. Most of these will be reimbursed through impact fees as they're collected. So pretty straightforward on these. Any questions?
Alright. The park impact fees will be a little bit different than what you've seen already. Last time there was only like the RSL field, which is gonna get completed in this budget year. And there's like the Molcott property, and the last payment was done on that already. So those two projects were taken off. So Wendy put together an updated projects list. Anything you want to talk to these, Wendy?
Sure. So some of these are development driven, new neighborhoods going in, some of them are connection driven, and we'll come back to or improving connectivity. The Desert Creek Trail has some obstacles
with one property owner that we're gonna have to get through probably this year. We're going out and doing the planning for it now and hope to make that connection, next year. And that's right off of Rose Canyon Road, and it will connect the cove all the way down to Butterfield Park eventually with an asphalt trail. That's the plan for that connection. And then Midas Creek, just making those asphalt connections as development comes in, connecting down to Copper Creek and then eventually all the way out west. Those will obviously both be phased kind of projects. Do you have them on different slides, or are they all on this?
Yeah, they're all on the
Okay.
slides.
Butterfield,
There are a couple of bridges as part of the
Yes,
Desert Creek
that's
Trail,
right. There are a couple bridges that go over the washes in both of these projects.
So Wendy,
Yes.
did you take into consideration commitments we've made for park impact fee funds?
Yes, Gordon and I went through some of those, so. This is a trail that runs east of Butterfield Park that needs some improvements. Right there between the school and the park. Black Ridge Storage Garage is tucked up in that corner. It will provide space for the utility vehicle that's out there that handles garbage and other operations on the trail, as well as some storage space for supplies. Prairie Oaks improvement, this is a park that was completed last year as part of the planning. A restroom facility was planned for that area, so this would be to install that bathroom. Arches Park, I think you all are familiar with this one. This is over in Anthem. We're in the middle of planning right now. We're almost done. We did our final engineering review on it earlier this week and hope to have construction documents and bid documents back soon, and hopefully those impact fees from that area will come in to get this project rolling.
On that one, so I'm assuming that cut out as a playground because I can't tell from here.
Yes, it is.
Relative size to the one we have outside.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. It's probably half that size.
You know my question. How big's that field?
Jonathan, do you remember the dimensions of that?
It's not big. It's like domes.
Pull it up.
Scale it up, yeah.
We pull it up. We'll get it for you.
Well, you can see
We
how
did
big
have a
the car,
request to put a
the cars
basketball
are.
court there. And said it would be much more utilized.
All these followers. Right.
Just gonna think that.
The Welby Jacobs Trail, this will eventually be a trail that runs along the entire section of the Welby Jacobs. This specific piece is on a piece of property that we own and will connect to the RSL trail that they're putting in. So we're doing a lot of these trails in bits and pieces, but eventually, kind of like the Jordan River Trail, you get done what you can get done, and then eventually you have a really great product at the end. Because John won't let us build stuff on property we don't own. Butterfield Parkway, this is 6600 West and Blackbrush Circle, right off of Butterfield Parkway. There's a trail that was put into that neighborhood that never connected anywhere, so we're going to connect it back to Glade Drive.
Just had a really nice exhibit. I don't know what happened to it. Fell off.
And then our primitive trails.
Oh, that's right
Oh,
there.
there it
That's where
is.
went.
Our primitive trails, our trails committee has been working really hard with GIS and the county to come up with some trails that we can get going. Joe, the trails committee chair, has been going out to bid to get some estimates on what things are going to cost, and they have some really good trail system layouts that we can get done and show some momentum and get some excitement going. So we'll actually start cutting one trail probably in April, the Sidewinder Trail, and then this one is part of the BST alignment that we're working on, the one that's shown here. Again, with these trails, it's bits and pieces as we have property and easements and money to get them done. But eventually, we're in a really good position for the BST, and that we've gotten the infusion of funding from the state, which will be really helpful in purchasing some properties that are critical to completing that. So the county's also very interested in helping us complete that BST project. So we'll be getting some funding from them, as well as hopefully some grant funding next year. Any questions? Yes, sir?
my understanding is there's only a couple of trail builders out there. Are we confident that what we have or what we want to accomplish will be able to actually get them in to do the work?
Yes, we've received 3 bids on every trail that we've proposed. One is a pretty well-known trail builder that's just relocated here from Bentonville, Arkansas, which is the trail capital of the United States. So we're really excited to work with him, and his bids came in really good. So we're excited. We're moving forward. The trouble that we run into is if we don't get them going now, then we won't get on the calendar. So we're getting some of those bids in. Joe's already gotten the bids. We're going to work on the contracts with John to get those completed. And get on the
About
calendar.
half of these items are on this year's budget and are moving forward because they haven't got it done.
So we're kind of moving things, splitting things.
I want to tell Wendy thanks for, she relooked at all of our trails, the ones that were missing pieces to connect them out of like Legacy and Copper Creek, and get them up into that Myers Creek trail system. This is a good thing that's happening, starting to connect the dots like she was talking about. So that's a huge win for the residents around that area, so they could actually get out of Copper Creek or Legacy all the way up to the high school, and then as that progresses west and continue on. So it's a good thing for the west side. We really don't have those trails on the west side of the city.
Exciting.
Sheffield Trail's last and the most exciting.
Fireworks. Fireworks.
Storm drain.
Storm drain, nothing's changed from the last time. So if there are any questions, we got the Rose Creek outfall for the East Herriman piece that we call it, down by RSL and Community College. Everything heading out up to Rose Creek. Currently there is no outfall, so all the ponds there, you remember, are retention ponds, and you can't landscape them or do any improvements to them until this happens. Then we can start making the ponds look a lot nicer in that area.
Have we made any headway on some of the other challenges on property ownership down there that we talked about last time?
We're working through it, and we have all the bits and pieces in place to negotiate with the property owner, and it's looking good right now. And then the last one is the 7300 West outfall. This also has a couple of retention ponds in the Jensen Place subdivision, and they'll be converted over. One will be converted into a building lot, one will be converted, it already was a building lot, it's just got a temporary retention easement over it. The easement will be lifted, they'll get their building lot back, and the other pond will be finished with landscaping.
This is really good to get this one and get that stormwater out of that area to the main channel, so the future when we get ready to do full improvements on the road, it's that one step closer.
So I have a weird question on this, and it's probably just a really not great question, but because you come through there and you tear up the road and then you resurface the road and stuff, is there any way you could do that sidewalk on that side as you come through and fix that?
The existing sidewalk or installed one?
Well, there's not an existing sidewalk in a lot, but.
You can't use stormwater.
That's true. I just wondered if somehow you can do the two at the same.
Combine projects.
Just so that maybe on the,
We agree,
on
but
one side there.
it's actually for the stormwater until we get funding for the road, but it's, like I said, it's still one step closer. We'd have to do that as part of the road project then when we start it, so.
You'd have to look
I
at
see
general
the funds
funding
right now.
Yeah, you have to supplement it
I
with
think
general
this is
fund.
impact fee road too.
It is impact.
It is, but that doesn't pay for sidewalk, just.
Oh, yeah, it's just curb to curb.
Okay, I was just curious, because I thought, well, you're digging it up and resurfacing, maybe we could throw a sidewalk in there as we go, but okay.
Yeah.
We could just tell the residents, get really excited and not do it.
No.
We have an engaging person that will figure it out.
That's not something I wanna engage in.
So, nothing changed from those, our funds look good for that, so those projects, are well funded out there for that one. The next one is our transportation impact fee funds. We've got the Autumn Crest Road with the new high school, that's moving along. It looks like we're going to probably bid that out later in the year. We couldn't get negotiations with the property owner in time. Now that if we bid it out, our bids will come back high because it's construction season. So we're gonna wait until November to bid that out. It'll still be in the correct budget year.
My question for that, getting out late, we missed our best time to bid that out. Are we still gonna get that done in time for the 2019
Yes.
open?
Riverton had always planned on bidding their portion out in about January. So there might be an opportunity to do an interlocal agreement and do it all as one project.
You know, you'll probably get some good bids by
That'll be
combining the project.
Takes it from a $2.4 million project to a $5 million.
Mobilization equipment and stuff.
Is the 2.4 a good number?
Mhm.
You only budgeted 2.2.
Yeah.
It's a good number, it just is the right number.
Well, Blake, your number includes water as well?
Yeah.
It included water, the water portion will come out, and I remember it was about 300,000.
It seems like we have the easement for water along the east side of the road, so we'll have the developers build the water line as they go with reimbursement rates. Because it won't go underneath the road. Main Street Connector Segment 3, we actually had a pre-construction meeting on that today, so that was underway. Nice to get going on that. Kilgore was the winning bidder on it. They actually built the other segment to the south segment already, so they're used to our plans, used to our design. Should go well. 6,000 West, this is a project that a developer will be paying a fee in lieu of, so it's kind of a wash on the funding. Whatever it costs, they'll pay for it, and we'll do it when they're ready. The last I heard, this pod is going to get pushed back several months, so this could happen this time next year. So we'll just keep an eye on it. We'll keep it in the budget.
So this is the spot across from the cemetery, right?
Mm-hmm. This will widen it out. Currently, the lane configuration's a little quirky, so we'll straighten it out and make it work a lot better. And then Main Street Connector Segment 2, which is the red segment. That's the portion that has some property issues on the south end. So we're working through that. This is,
So on this one, you can see the price tag up there. When we get to the budget, you're not gonna have that much money. So what we're suggesting to you is that we don't spend all the money because you can't get there, because there's a potential we should be agile. We'll talk more about that as we get closer to the budget season. That we want the budget adoption season. We're in the budget season right now.
We're on it.
So I wanted you to see that number, and
How
then
much
we'll
closer
talk
do
to
we need to
you
get?
specifically about that number and what that means.
Get down to the final shuffle.
Yeah, so,
Is there.
so anyway, that's just.
Can I just ask a general question when it comes to these road projects and the contracts? What do we have in there that talks about, I mean, obviously we go with lowest qualified bid on these, but what do we have in there that talks about that it's actually a good project and a product when they're done?
Right.
I'm
We have language in.
I'm aware of a couple of other roads around,
Yeah.
you know, that have been done in other communities that have had some significant challenges with the quality. So, again, obviously being fiscally minded and making our dollar stretch as far as we can, but if we end up with a project that costs us more money to go back and fix or extended delay, I just want to make sure that we're getting quality out of the money that we're spending. Because sometimes it is worth it sometimes to spend just a hair more to get the quality that you know you're going to get.
Legally, we have to issue the bid to the low bidder, if they're qualified. If they meet all the qualifications, they do. So Jonathan and I
But what
are
have I been saying? Put the criteria.
pre-qualification.
But the criteria is, he says that word, but there's really no criteria you can put in there. The criteria is, if they came in and were convicted felons, they can't do the project. So it's very difficult to say what that criteria is. If they've done a contract and they can bond, you can't draft up any
Why
criteria.
can you not look at the quality of the product though?
The
Because
past projects.
the past projects, because I could string off a handful of contractors that should not be doing work. And I won't.
She's passionate about this, I can
I
tell.
won't.
Let's
No,
quit it.
but the point being, so we are the stewards of taxpayer money. We are required to go with the low bid, and we know that the low bid is going to give us a shoddy project.
Right.
That's a problem.
And cost us more money in the long run.
We have to go back and fix it, and so why can you not use I'll be looking here, why can you not use the reputation of the person or the
How do you use that?
previous
We've talked
work?
about this.
You identify criteria.
Yeah, but I'm saying, how do you put in the reputation? We've asked you this, and we can't find words that actually do that. You know what I'm saying?
Let's talk offline. I don't remember
So
anybody.
Jonathan-
Okay, so I am very interested in this discussion.
As we all are.
Because I think this is something that is, and not just us, but I think every city should not be required to go with somebody that they know is not going to do the job worthy of what we're paying them for. There ought to be a way to get, just as you said, pay a little bit more and know that we are actually getting good product, because it is very frustrating to put something in and then the very next season see it fall apart. That's just not.
There's two things I want to talk about to address that. One, we've talked a little bit about doing a post-construction evaluation. They evaluate us, we evaluate them. And then keep those on record, and then over time we'll have enough that you have to score so high on this evaluation to be qualified to bid on our future projects. We've talked with John a little bit about it to see if that's legal. And
I
there's
would certainly think that past experience with certain contractors should be able to weigh in
put a
there.
score together, and then they have to have a score. Our other thing is, Jonathan and I, as great of designers as we are, we have been bidding out a lot of these projects to firms that have, 15, 20 people that are specialized in this. And drawing up a tight set of plans with a good
I have
spec.
to defend both of you, John. You're very capable of doing it. It's just so much work, you can't keep up with it, flat out.
It's busy. So we've hired a consultant, and they've done a fantastic job writing up a tight spec and making sure our standards are there. And then the other side of that is inspection, making sure that we have plenty of time for our inspector to get out and visit the project site so that things aren't happening without them there watching.
I just think that what you're doing is key, what additional work we do is key, because the quality of the road as it is first installed is really, really important, particularly when we know, as we've just discussed, that there is a complete failure in maintenance dollars. So, all the more important to build a solid foundation road, knowing that we're still, in the black hole, as it were, to keep up with. And we're in a good place, at least as a new community, because we're putting in roads. We're not like a, established community that's in the reconstruction stage of roads. So anyway, just a bigger discussion for another day, but I do think raising our standards and who we work with, particularly if we can do it legally, well, I mean, only if we can do it legally.
Mostly.
Mostly. Legal-ish.
Legal-ish. And I think our taxpayers would know we are watching out for it all. Very legal.
So the deficit in this one is part of that 3.2 million where Gordon had talked a little bit about the Agile funds. And then some of this can be impact fee reimbursements. So we'll have the developer either pay the fee in lieu or build the improvements, and then we'll do the reimbursement. So the last one is our general fund projects. I think there was just one project that we added that wasn't on here before, number 6. And we have a whole discussion item on number 6 later. So remember that exhibit, I'll show it to you.
This is just for 2018, 2019, correct?
Yes. Yeah, this is the budget that you'll be voting on. It'll start in July. And so some of these landscaping projects will be modified because we've gotten some better budget numbers back from our consultant, and they'll be downscaled a little bit, especially Herriman Boulevard. This pond will not be landscaped, it'll just be left natural. You might only do the piece that goes out to 64th and not this piece.
When we say left natural, what do we actually mean by that?
The way it is right now.
Weeds?
With grass, so this area has about 10 feet of landscaping back a walk. We would do that landscaping and then put some type of mow strip is what we're looking at to act as a buffer between that natural and that. So it would blend in.
For the time being?
We'd have to save, it's a cost saving measure.
Yeah.
So for the budgets on that, I did not update that with the Houston project on.
You've got some numbers, I guess, on that for later.
We'll discuss that in a minute. So are there any questions on any of the capital projects? Now it's Alan's job to tell us if we have money, I guess. Ish.
McHouston was budgeted at 380.
Yeah, it should say 380 on it. Well, it's 382 is what we're looking at right now. Okay.
So if you have any questions, let us know, because we're planning our budget around these capital things. Oh, great, yeah. Okay, so it's always important to be creative how we spend the money, but it's also important to be creative how we make the money. So we're going to talk about potential budget revenue. And I think this one's important because,
Everybody laughs when he starts to talk.
He's always entertaining.
Brett kind of tasked us to be really creative, thinking out of the box. Alan's come up with some very creative, but we're also going to talk about traditional things. We'll say, what property tax means, what fees mean, what those things. But we want to talk about some ideas that I think have some opportunity to save our residents some money and as well as get additional funds. And we'll talk about that. And so Alan's going to start off showing why there's a need for us to be thinking. The need isn't for next year or the year after that, but in 5 or 10 years, we have to be doing something different than we're doing now. So Alan's going to start.
Well, start with this quote, and this is from the Better City study we just got. The key to achieving a balanced economy is developing multiple and diversified municipal revenue streams that can provide consistent, ongoing, and predictable income. This income is ultimately what allows the city to maintain infrastructure, maintain parks, invest in, and fund resident-focused amenities such as recreation centers and myriad of services. When we look at our revenues, we don't have diversified revenue streams. We essentially have sales tax. We have a little bit of property tax and a little bit of park fee, but we are totally relying on property or sales tax to make up the difference. This graph shows us how much of our one-time money we're using for operations and how it's growing, and there's a pretty big disparity between what we get in ongoing revenue and what we have in ongoing expenses. As we look at the Better City study, one of the things that shows us is that even a complete build out, we can only expect $5 million of local sales tax. We're already exceeding that amount. We'll probably gain another 2 million or so because of population by the population-based portion of that. So right now, that's about what it would take to cover what our difference is right now. So we've got to be looking at some other ways to get us ongoing regular revenue to offset that, because at some point, and it's not all that many years away, the economy's going to stop, or we're going to be built out and be less than what we need to operate the city. One of the suggestions that was made a couple of meetings ago was that maybe we should just not take the change in the tax rate this year that will happen because of increased property values. Did a calculation on that, and this is using last year's numbers because this year's are not out yet. But if we had held the line on property taxes last year, it would have made us at $29,000 is all that it would have done. So in my estimation, that's not worth going through a truth in taxation hearing to raise $29,000. Just, and this is not something I'm proposing, but just as an example, if we were to triple our city share of taxes right now, that would give us a total, that says change, but it's not change, that would be total. We would add about $1.2 million to our property taxes. So we would still be just under $2 million in property taxes. That kind of tax, tripling our city share of property taxes, would cost someone with a $300,000 home about $125 a year. So, but it would add about $1.2 million to what we're doing. Now, my next thing is something that I've pretty high on is, right now, we bill for water, Los Edgefield Waste and Recycling got bills for garbage, South Valley Sewer bills for sewer, and, so each one of us have a staff of people to manage payments and do accounts and so forth, do deposits. For us, that total amount is about $300,000 a year, just to manage the customer service kind of things. And I believe each one of these would as well. So the proposal would be to go to these organizations and set up a wholesale arrangement where we paid them a wholesale price, we did the billing, and we're able to adjust the cost to cover what we need to. Our customers would get one bill instead of three. They could come here and set up all three services. We would deal directly with these agencies.
So this would be increasing the services increasing the benefit that our residents.
It would increase the residents. Right now, a big share of our customer service is borne by the water department. If we had 3 enterprise funds, we would be dividing that between other funds, which would save us money in the water fund and allow other funds. Right now, the sewer district is asking us to use our building permits to try and help them get people hooked up, because they have a lot of people, a lot of contractors just hooking up, not paying fees, not getting on the rolls for the bills. So they're asking us to do that. Well, our mechanism for collecting those bills is shutting off the water.
You just can't shut the sewer.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have appreciable difference in cost if we were able to do something like this, because it would just be 2 more line items on the bill. There's no meters for them. One of the ideas that I've floated was that we put meters on the outflow of the sewer, so we know how much we're actually putting into the system, where maybe we could do our cost based on that, or we could do it by hookup. We would still allow the sewer district to have their impact fees and their hookup fees so that they maintain the system. And it would allow us 2 more revenue sources. And where this would not cost us any money to do, but it would cut the costs of the other agencies, if we could just generate a savings of $2 on each account for each of these, which I think the savings would actually be more than that, but that would save us, or provide us an extra $500,000 a year that would go to the city. Our accounting system would just add 2 more lines on the bill. When they come in to sign up for water, it's one account they set up and add the line items. So it wouldn't be a cost to us to administer this. So, what I would like to do is start approaching these guys and working around a plan to where, but right now, if someone calls in to get water, our people set them up on water and then tell them, now you gotta call Wasatch Waste, now you gotta call South Valley Sewer, and this would allow us to be the one that managed that interface with those agencies, and our customers would just deal with us. Gives us an opportunity to make some money, possibly even be able to reduce the cost of our residents.
It definitely help us offset some cost. And now, this is his genesis that he's done on this, and he's told me a few times to explain it. Also tells how it works. But their thing is that customer service piece. I'm so shocked still on how much walk-in traffic we have to take in their water bill. And now they walk in to pay those 3 bills. And we're not anything about stopping on living and all that, and pushing utilities. But it's a good thought process. It does, cost savings to us. Gives us cost savings when we bring that money, offsets our cost a great deal in the water part of those customer service areas, which keeps more money for general fund items. I really commend Alan to, because he's been challenged, and Mike Horner's been challenged on economic development, he's been challenged to say, where can we save money, how can we help bring down revenues into the city? We know the ones that doesn't make you happy, so that's why he went to work on about this, so.
And it shows that government can be efficient.
Do you,
I would go that.
do you have I guess enough information or anticipate that by suggesting this to either of those other two entities, that they would see a decrease of revenue on their side?
I don't think they would, for example, to print and mail the bills, nothing else, no other customer service, just print, mail the bills, each one of them would save $50,000 a year, just if they don't have to print and mail the bills.
Be duplicated.
Yeah, right now, all three of us are doing that.
So my question's similar. What roadblocks do we see? What reasons would they have not to?
I think the only reason I can see is if they want to control the whole thing, you know. I don't see a financial reason that they would not want to do.
Unless potentially they have some additional overhead built into it that by taking it away may cause a decrease in potential revenue to them.
You know,
But again,
I
I don't
would
know.
think that the process we would go to is go to them and say, let's do a study of how much you have to have to run your system without the billing for our residents. And see what that comes
What
up
that
to.
does, yeah.
You know,
No,
that
I'm-
ought to
I'm-
cover, it has to be enough to cover their costs. But, you know, you look at what we're paying, and I know that they've got to be paying comparable costs. We can just take a major savings just by sending one bill instead of three. They would be able to not have as many customer service people. You know, you take 10,000 bills and 10,000 payments out of their system.
And not to mention, you know, the number of trees we could save, we can't forget about
Yeah.
those.
Well, and we are pushing to get our people on e-bills where they get them by email. So, you know, if we made the transition and then we could transition our people to more of the e-bills, we would have even more savings there than we could do.
It may be their one messaging touch point with their clients in terms of sending out, you know, newsletters or, you know, that may be one point.
But, you know, we could have the ability to do that
Share
for them.
a messaging piece, yeah, which I think could be an offer that we could make is that, again, just the duplication, it seems a bit ridiculous, and if it was wanting to do a newsletter quarterly or whatever it might be to touch the various customer base, that's certainly something that could be done.
We're hearing. Understanding this on your end like you do, Alan, obviously they're exporting all of that data to one bill provider now. Now, the fact that they potentially have to split a piece of that out, do you see any potential issues with that?
I see what we would do is we would have an arrangement where for garbage, we pay them so much per month per service. And we would know how many services we have by how many are signed up and how many we're billing. And, you know, it would be, we would know both of the services from what we're billing.
Yeah.
The way I've seen it.
Instead of exporting 10,000, they're exporting one.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the way I've seen it and the way I've done it in the past is that when billing time comes, I would notify the garbage, we did 10,120 services, and that's what our fee would be based on, because that's what we billed for, you know, because we will know how many have it by how many come in and sign up.
There's always ways to make sure that we have the accounting
Right.
appropriately.
You know, and
we have full confidence.
When you're looking at sewer, you've got either connections or you've got flow. I've seen it billed both ways, but, you know, I really think that the savings would be closer to $3, if I'm being conservative here.
And the strength, like Alan said, you can't shut off water, they lean property until they sell the property, they don't get anything out of it. So that's the problem with surveys, they have a developer out there that's moving forward and hooking up houses, and we're allowing occupancy, but now he's asked us, Craig White's asked if you've been part of that.
So we could turn off their water if they don't pay.
As part of the total bill?
For anything in the bill.
You
So
don't
it
pay
gives
your
them some
bill?
teeth that they don't have.
If they don't.
They have
Which
no
to
teeth.
them,
They're asking us
If you
to
go to
be
the house
teeth
and actually
right now,
find the
which
house.
is still hard for us.
Well, right now, they're asking us not to issue building permits if they don't pay it, but,
this is a much better.
but that's hard to track and keep track of. But if someone's coming in to set up utility services and they gotta have it to get water, you set up the others while you're doing it.
So my question is, do we wanna take on the liability of being responsible for enforcing another entity's collections?
Well, I don't see it that way. I see that what we are doing is buying a wholesale service from them exactly like we do with Jordan Valley Water. We buy water from them and resell it. We would be buying these services from these entities and reselling it.
I can look at that.
I'm just curious, for those of us who don't live in the city, how many of us have a consolidated utility payment like this? I know I do,
I don't.
and it works great.
Yeah.
I love it.
Also,
And to be honest, the residents are gonna assume.
What
we'll
about
do
their
this anyways.
very anonymous?
Yeah, well, Tooele.
I think that would be the right approach there, Alan, because the only pitfall I can see is control, and that is an issue with agencies. They want to go like this, right? More so.
Well, I think it's about
But
relationships.
the approach of showing them, here's
How we can help.
here's what we're proposing, here's how we can help you,
Yeah, the sewer district really has no way to really collect.
especially say with the building permits, et cetera. That's where it would be kind of win-win.
I have seen it done more often the way I'm proposing than the way it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you, I mean, you just need not to pursue?
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds
Absolutely.
great.
I'd be happy to have at least one of those conversations with you.
And Sherry with the Wasatch Front, we've not had any conversations with either entity, but now we're getting ready to.
So we want you to hear it first before your entities hear it. And again, we know of places, some large users in Herriman that have not paid their sewer bill in years. And now they can collect it all.
Okay.
Right now they have zero ability, and so we think that, with the emails you've seen from Ken White, this is the right way to go.
Realize not paying your bills was an option.
Just saying.
It is.
I've been going about that all
Seeing a
along.
slight savings for my own personal pocket, let's just hold on.
You come in and watch them.
If you don't pay your sewer bill, the only recourse they have is to sue you.
Right. They can
And for a, $20 a month bill or 30 or whatever it is here, it takes a long time to get a big enough bill to even
It's worth
justify
taking the
thinking
action.
about
Justify it.
And people move in and out, and pretty soon it just becomes,
We encourage our residents to pay all of their bills.
right.
To be fiscally responsible as we try to be with the taxpayers' funds.
And beyond this, I just want to have you start thinking about some other things. Blake's gonna talk about storm drain fee, but I think we need to be thinking as a council about increasing our park fee. I also think we need to be considering a streetlight fee. As you look at all the cities around us, we are years and years behind everyone else in putting revenues together to make ends meet for the budget.
What percentage of our park maintenance and operations is paid for by our park impact fee?
Just under 25%.
So we spend
That's
4
not
times.
But operations and maintenance isn't paid by impact fee.
No, not impact fees, by
Park
the,
user fee.
by the park fee.
Park fee. I'm talking about park fee.
You said impact.
Okay.
No, I apologize.
Big
I meant
difference.
park fee.
It was a good catch.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. I meant the park fee.
Okay, the park fee this year will hit right at $700,000. Our park maintenance will be right at 2.8 million,
So triple what we collect is what we pay to.
4 times.
Four times, okay, so 4 times. And it's one of the things that, hands down, our residents have said time and time again, we want our parks. And it's the only thing I've ever heard a resident say, well, increase my fee so that we can have our parks. So this would be something that I would be willing to consider. Not necessarily give an okay, but in the future.
No, it's
But to-
something for you to think about.
But to that point, have we ever clearly asked that question? I mean, of
Yes.
course they want their parks. Have we ever said, do you want your parks and do you want to pay 3 or 4 times? That's the question I would like to ask, is that
I think that's
specific
valid.
question.
Though, I heard over and over again during the general plan discussion, give us a bigger park fee and don't give us density.
Well, I would never tie those
And
two
that's a
together.
different
I
question.
would, I would say, do you want parks at this additional expense?
But the thing that was being said is, a lot of people were putting out there that we need density to balance the budget of the city. And a lot of people were coming back and saying, just raise the park fee, and then you don't need the density. A lot of people said that.
Because but there's absolutely, yeah.
The
Doesn't even make any sense, there's no
It's a
correlation
different question,
at all,
but that was what was coming back.
But can we, to the point, can we do one of our quick surveys and specifically get to that question of open space and true cost of what open space is and ought to be? Because I think right now, there is the misnomer that there is little to no cost for all of this open space, and nothing could be further from the truth, it's very costly.
And the current park fee is only $5
$5
a month.
residents.
A resident, so not even per person, it's $5 per resident per month, so.
Compensate would be at $20.
But if we chose to take on
We took on full burden.
the full burden, you know.
So I
There's
think,
something we ought to talk about.
so I think what's interesting with this graph, if you look at the numbers, that disparity, you saw that $5.5 million. So you're thinking about the park fee, we do an extraordinary amount of park and open space compared to our neighbors. They're nowhere near that budget percentage that we are. And so that is a critical question I think each council has to keep answering for the next 20 years. Is parks and trails that important? And back to the public, are they willing to bear that? And are we going to, right now we're doing on the backs of development. That's how we're paying for it. And so the next thought for you is looking at the neighbors around us, like South Jordan, Draper, Sandy, West Jordan, all these cities, they have fairly robust commercial entities. And they're getting property tax, sales tax, but all of them can't make it unless they put in other fees. They all have a stormwater fee, they all have other things. So I'm just telling you, if we look at the pattern as the cities grow, you still have this gap, and so now I'm going to turn the time over to Blake, because he wants to talk.
I'd like to ask a quick question. Go back a slide or two there, Alan, if you wouldn't mind. No, one more, I guess. So you looked at the difference of, if we'd have held last year's tax rate steady to this year, did you have, I mean, obviously we've seen home values continue to increase for several years. Did you have an opportunity to go back 2 or 3 years and look at, if we, going back 2 or 3 years, if the city had held that tax rate steady, how much that would be producing now today?
I would guess that we would have to go back 6 years for that to be substantial, but I haven't calculated that.
I'd be
but
interested
I can
to
calculate
see
it for you.
I would just be able to keep up with it.
Yeah.
That's my point is yes, that's not a substantial amount right there, but as an idea that if the city potential would have started doing that 3 years ago, what would that equate to now today in additional revenue?
You know, back 2011, 2012, the rates were considerably higher than they are right now.
Yep.
And so there has been a pretty good drop in the last 6 or 7 years.
Right.
But, I'll do that calculation.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see going back 3, 4, maybe even 5 years and see what that would equate to dollars today if we'd have held that steady for the whole time.
Just rough numbers in my head, tell me if you're thinking differently, Alan, but even go back 2011 to now, best case, that number might be 300,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still, to me, that's not a substantial amount of money for the budget.
Each year you would have to do a truth and taxation each of those.
Right, understand that. But, again, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
And if you'd had the opportunity to kind of look ahead and where our budget was gonna go and what values we're gonna do, then you might have been able to make that decision to say, we see this disparity just getting larger and larger, and now's the time to take action. But
One of the things to think about too, though, is, in the last year, we've had Slovisa, UFSA, South Valley Sewer, the school district, all get tax increases.
all increase, yep.
And some of them quite substantial.
And they all say it's only this much on whatever.
On a $275,000
property tax is nearly double.
We might be better looking at fees rather than looking at the tax rate, you know, just because of
Fair point.
all of our partners are taking tax increases.
That
Which we
being
don't have
said, the
more.
residents don't see any difference
It's the
between a
same
fee and a
tax.
tax.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Sometimes taxes are hid by the word fee.
There's a difference
Well,
for what's deducted.
The other thing with fees though, are things like schools and churches and
So
those
if you have a Salt Lake Community
Yes.
College.
would be
it's
paid,
a
Yeah.
School
where
district.
So
you
equity
wouldn't-
in
the
payment.
taxes wouldn't be paid by those
Yeah,
entities.
they don't get around it.
And they're the big impact to those things.
But,
Which will be part of our messaging
Yeah.
if and when we go there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. these
But-
are the
But the
things-
city's been hesitant to take those same steps.
Yeah,
To keep up with their budgets because everybody else
Yeah.
has taken that.
We've taken-
And being cognizant, obviously, to the residents, we've stepped back and allowed everyone else, as you just
Right.
mentioned, to put those increases, but the city has not done that.
no.
And we're falling further and further behind,
And it keeps us depending on what? The one-time fees.
the one time, yeah.
Or-
Right now, Herriman is the top tax rate in the state, other than downtown Salt Lake City. The high rises
All the taxes.
downside have a higher rate than us. Other than that, we're right at the top.
And that's because we have no fees.
Salt Lake County.
Right.
That would be a question I would have too, is why does Salt Lake County get so much more?
Don't get me started.
That is.
Great, Tammy,
that's a
cut to a
great
break.
conversation, and Alan is one that is very passionate about that issue, because it is, where are those dollars really
Yeah,
being
it
spent?
seems like there's some disparity.
We get the
So
library, get the
I
rec
just
center.
wanna make one point for the camera, cause
I made the ask the question.
everyone I talk to, and I thought this before I got involved in this stuff, people think that their property tax goes to the city. So when you say Herriman has the highest tax rate, what does that really mean? That
Well,
doesn't, go ahead.
I mean, that's our overall tax to our residents, not what we get, but
Not what
what
we
they
get.
get in their property tax. Our total property tax rate that goes to our residents is right at the top.
When you
So
combine.
But of that,
so
how
that-
much actually goes to the city?
So that
3%.
includes,
How much?
3%.
3%.
Sorry. Go ahead,
so that includes the school district, the county, police, fire, etc. That's where all the
Steel
property
maintenance.
tax goes.
Yes.
Right, so I gave this example several times in the newsletter, but resident after resident I talk to tell me, I don't want this city to raise my property taxes. Well, the city doesn't raise your property taxes, those other entities do. Of $5,500 property tax bill, $130 of it went to Herriman City. The rest of it was school district,
By the way,
county,
thanks for.
police, fire. That's where that goes. How does it get offset? Why is it's through the commercial account, right? Those other entities that pay property taxes, what can help lower those bills?
And to your point, 100, you said 130? 130, local government, it's the best return on investment that there is. I mean, the amount of services you get for what you inject into your local city is.
That's kind of why I side with Alan on this one in that for it to make a difference, we would have to substantially increase our portion and continue to so. I mean, just by making this one change, if you look at those numbers that are conservative, you fast forward your slides on to
For the billing? Yeah.
right at 480 being conservative, thinking is probably another dollar. That's 720. One small change that only enhances services.
Yes.
Out is 10 to 15 years worth of holding that tax rate. So if there's things like this that we can do, pursue other things,
Right.
use our creativity.
But
I
I
think
think by going back and doing that data research, that helps make the argument
Yeah.
of
Oh,
what are
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
absolute
it's
ways
not
to
a
go.
hard thing, I can do it quickly.
Feels a lot like common sense, and government is not known for that, so it might be a problem.
I think it's one of those communication pieces.
Engagement.
It's just a soapbox
But
issue for
Alan,
me
go
that
back to
people
that first
mistakenly
graph
think
you had.
I know,
all the
and
money goes to
we
the city.
pushed it out,
That.
and we count how
I know.
many times. But and again, we'll push it out again because it's budget season, and we'll remind them again. And a good time, right, when tax notices come in the mail, we do it then too. Push that
So-
message, because it's good to look
Just so that I'm having a hard time hearing everybody today with all the fans running. So the Nicole, I'm sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, no, so, I mean, and we're not the only city that has to look at this. Sandy, a couple of years ago, did a long-term, financial study that, you know, essentially painted a similar picture. When you look out in the future, we are unsustainable at the rate we are. But that was helpful for the council to look at, and more importantly, for the residents, where they could see the practicality of what we're talking about. So it's one thing to, I mean, I really do want to, for the parks discussion, I really do want to just have that very succinct question. That being said, I would love to have you capture the unsustainability that we are that's imminently in front of us in some form that we can then push out, because we are going to have to raise revenue.
Yeah.
And it's one way or another.
When I read the Better City study, the main point, because we all anecdotally knew what it was gonna tell us. The thing that it gave it is it quantified the amount of commercial that we can really sustain in traditional retail. And when you look at what they're proposing as what our total would be, it falls short of what we're gonna need. So, you know, I think we can take the numbers they've given us along with numbers we see in our financials, and I think put together.
And that creative element they talked about. So traditional sales tax, we are capped. The ability to raise other revenues through some of the fees that we've talked about, and then looking at some of these very creative niche opportunities to bring in revenue. But I mean, we just need to be creative based on where we are.
This is a time for being creative for sure.
Okay. Thank you. Do you need any further direction from the council at this point?
We just wanted to make you aware of it. We didn't want you going into your board meetings.
We appreciate that.
Hearing about something that, this is Blake's portion of this.
We knew this was gonna have some generation discussion, so we're scheduling a continuation of this item a week from today, just to answer the questions that come out of this discussion.
So I just want to say thanks, Alan. I talked to Mickey about this the other day, and this is a great outside of the box, start looking at other ideas for revenue without having to impact more fees and things, do things that make sense, so thank you for coming up with this type of solution.
I do think that, I mean, and that's a point again that we do need to make, that the city is tightening their own belts, looking for ways to be efficient before we look at, you know, fees and taxes.
Appreciate that, Alan. Thank you very much. I think we'll go ahead and move on to, we're still in the same item.
Blake's got one more item on this.
Oh, come on.
We're still talking about revenue. This is inside the box thinking, not outside the box.
So I wanted to do.
Trying to move it on. That's all I was trying to do.
I want to say what was it, Churchill said. He told his staff that we're out of money, now we must think. And so,
preferably we think before we're out of money.
Well, we could do it that way too, and I have another quote for that, but we'll just stick with that one for today.
So about a year ago, I went through the 2 worst days of my life, I think. It was our storm drain audit, and it was horrible. It was miserable. Our program that we run here is funded out of general fund, and it's very minimal. Almost every other city has a storm drain fee that funds their stormwater program. And the stormwater program is set up to hit a certain goal. It's set up by the US EPA, managed by the state EPA. And there's some things we have to do in maintenance and emergency response to maintain our stormwater quality. The big part right now for us is the inspection side. There's so much building, so much construction going on that we're not able to keep up with the needed inspections and the documentation. So this is kind of what our stormwater quality requirements are. Right now we're hitting the maintenance probably 90%, 95% of what we should be doing. The emergency response, we're coming around on that, but it's still hard to hit. The inspections we're falling pretty flat on. We issue about 100 building permits a month. We're supposed to inspect every one of those sites about once every 2 to 3 weeks. And all the active sites, that puts us inspecting probably about 2,000 building sites a month. So we just don't have the manpower to do that right now. And then we have some public education and outreach requirements to go out and go to the schools. We do our best with that, but in our audit, we found out we weren't doing enough to satisfy them. And our documentation side of it's really lacking. We document as much as we can, but the state wants a lot more. So, we'll talk a little bit more about what other cities are doing to meet these requirements. Our audit, I kind of wanted to follow up on that. We haven't got our results back on it yet. I've been talking with the director of the stormwater program at the state. She's getting ready to mail it, and there's a potential that we could get a fee or a fine. We
That's
don't
what I
know
was just
yet.
gonna ask, how much could that potentially be?
I don't know. It could be millions of dollars. So.
Do they often, I mean, is that more of a threat, as in get your house in order, or do they actually expect?
What I understand with other cities that have been, the only place that I know that's been fined is Salt Lake County. Other cities have been threatened with fines and said, get this and this and this in order by this date, or else the fine is implemented. So, I heard an analogy the other day. We're kind of speeding everywhere and just hoping we don't get a ticket. We don't want to continue speeding everywhere and not get our ticket.
We don't have a quota.
You can cry, right?
There's no quota.
Cry, you can cry,
Yes, did you
cut off with a warning?
So-
I know that some councils heard some of this before, but this is a real concern to us. We're kind of panicking right now. We don't know what to do. If we have to fund this all general fund, we will have to take a big hit for everything.
Our audit
For the
results are in there.
fee?
To be able to raise the money, but if we do a fee, it'll be like enterprise, like water. Fees come in, we can spend in that area.
Yeah.
Or your engineer. That's what it covers, period.
Nothing should be in it.
So, Alan kind of talked a little bit about fees and taxes and how the churches pay. The thing that's good about the stormwater fee is it is proportional to the user. So, like a Smith's or a church will pay an equivalent residential unit. So the other cities go through and say about a quarter-acre lot is one ERU or equivalent residential unit. It calculates how many typical impervious square feet area there is in a quarter-acre lot, and they say that's what an ERU is.
So you're saying that's a standard size building?
Yeah, standard size building lot. So when you go to a church, you say, oh, you're 6 ERUs.
Sorry.
Yep. I can't speak in normal terms right now. So anyway, the fee is proportional. There's a few cities in Salt Lake County that I found that don't have a fee. Alta, Cottonwood Heights, Holiday, and us. Everyone else has a fee. They range from about $3 to $9. We've been doing a little research over the past few weeks. Draper City, for example, is a $9 fee, and then that's per ERU, and then for commercial, they also have just $9 per ERU.
So Holiday's about build out, Cottonwood Heights about build out? I mean,
They're a new city though. Cottonwood Heights just was incorporated like
yeah,
what,
no,
3 or 4
I'm just looking at the,
10 to build up.
yeah, I'm just saying,
12.
we're a fast growing city, so if you're looking at the one city that doesn't fit amongst the others, it will be Herriman.
And I was talking with the consultant that is the engineer for Holiday the other day, and they're about ready to get audited. So they're asking about what our fee was and what to do. So their annual budgets for these other cities range from about 1.2 to 5.5 million a year, the ones that charge a fee. The one that I looked at, Cottonwood Heights, doesn't charge a fee. Their annual budget's about 175,000 a year. So I can almost guarantee they're not meeting the minimum
Ours
requirements.
is 225.
We're more than them. And we're paying it out of general fund.
So what we're saying is we're looking at an opportunity to make sure we're in compliance with what we need to be in compliance
So this is why the fee would be recommended. Other cities, this is how they're paying for it. So this is another revenue source, and this is how the other cities are handling it.
So
Anything else you
the
wanna
thing
add?
we want you to think about is, we believe this letter is gonna hit us before or just around the budget time. We don't want the public to say, well, why did you know this was coming? We said, yeah, we did. So one of the things that Blake's gonna be putting in his budget is $125,000 for a fee study to fund, we believe if we were to try to meet the minimum ranges of what we think it's gonna take, it's gonna be about 1.2 million bucks for us to meet what the EPA expects us to do. We think, we haven't got the report card. This is all of our guessing, looking at what other cities have been required to do, and what we're gonna get.
It's gonna be a little higher.
It could be.
But the issue would be is somebody's gonna come in, hit us with a letter, say, here's a fee, or here's a fine, either do this or pay fines perpetually forever. Well, we're not gonna do that. So the fee study, you can't just go and impose a fee, you have to do a study. But we're putting that in the budget so that when the council elects, we can execute that study, and it takes about 6-8 months. Then it ends up with a fee that you can charge people that we can adopt and sets up. And so some of that boils down to the time frame that the State Department gives us to, or the Utah EPA lets us go forward. You know, so there's going to be some critical path elements here. We want to be agile, be able to think about it, and say, oh, we're already on it, we got the budget ready to go. We just, you know how things go. And so we just want you to be aware of that. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
I just had two other things that we talked about for fees.
Can I just, how long, was they here like 2 or 3 weeks to run on it? It seemed like it went on forever.
It felt like it was only 2 days.
It was brutal.
I saw Monty cry those 2 days.
Monty actually.
Dehydrated myself. He's still in therapy.
So the other fees we wanted to just throw out there, these are revenue ideas again. Chris earlier talked about Provo having a road maintenance fee. It's not very common, some cities have it, but it's another opportunity to help pay for road maintenance.
Pleasant Grove just implemented it.
And I think
Based
when
on
I,
the same model as Provo?
No,
when I talked about capital projects a few weeks ago, I brought up a news story. It was up in Kaysville, and their city council was lit up, I guess, in a meeting over it when they proposed it. So
There's like
it's pretty controversial.
a pretty high.
It was pretty high. Yeah, the businesses were really high. They were like $400, $700 a month on there. So. And then the other one is a street light fee. We have a bunch of street lights. We've been putting, all of our infrastructure in the city basically has come in a short period of time. So in 20, 25, 30 years, a lot of this infrastructure will be wearing out and have to get replaced. So we need to think about our replacement schedule on street lights and get going on it. I know we've had one, and we've done it for a short time and then backed off of it to use those funds elsewhere. So a street light fee will also cover the operating costs for power, and people run into them and we can't collect on the insurance and things like that.
This is a fairly common one amongst other cities, is it not?
Alan researched that a little bit. I know a few
several
cities
have it, but not as many as the storm drain fee.
Is it storm drain? Okay.
Well,
Yeah, most, there's lots of cities that have it.
Yeah.
I was just shocked when Wachtell even has it.
yeah,
It's kind of surprising to me.
yeah.
The stormwater fee is the most common because it's paying for an unfunded mandate. That's basically what it is. And so that's all I have on revenue. I didn't think outside the box. I just came up with fees.
Well, to your point though, it seems like on the stormwater fees that amount that we're gonna need to cover that's gonna go up one way or another, whether it's to meet the standard or whether it's to pay the fine.
They don't have a choice.
Some don't have a choice, yeah.
And
It's gonna go up.
It's all
Yeah,
federal
if you don't
government's
do it, they
fault.
fine you the first time, they're gonna come back and it's gonna get
Then it's gonna be really bad.
And the fear we have is if we just take it out of general fund, our level of service is good, but it would get very depleted if we tried to just, if we took our general fund, took a 1.5, it would hit us on our capital projects, it would hit us on our smiling faces you see around the table, it just hit us a lot of ways.
It would take most of our ability to do capital projects.
What's that?
On our emojis?
Yes. That.
You guys are Alan.
Correct, here.
Right, Alan.
Is that,
It would eliminate most of our ability to do capital projects.
Okay, that's all. And so we're gonna come back with some of the comments you have, if you have any other things, but the earlier ones we talked about, we'll start bringing you some information.
I think we should invest heavily into money trees. Let's start doing some research there. Alright, so that was item 2.3. So we'll go ahead and move on to item 2.4, discussion regarding the Houston Lake.
Trouble for your money tree this time.
Need to know when to use the money.
That was to never make an appearance again, as I recall.
No
Put
images.
that in the, don't ever use it. All right, so we can scratch Gene off. I didn't really do much for that. we can talk about it if we need to. But for McHouston, purpose of this discussion I understood was, one, to talk about the right-of-way negotiations that we're going to be doing. Get clear definition from the council that we're gonna negotiate with them that they're to donate their right-of-way. And if they don't wanna donate, does that kill the project?
For me, it does.
For me, it does.
Okay. The scope of the project, right now, I'm planning on curb gutter.
So you got your answer.
That was clear. I wanted to get clear on the scope of the project. It'll include curb gutter, sidewalk, street lights, and we talked about landscaping because we'll have this park strip in front, probably giving each resident a credit, I guess, or money to do that, and then give them a time frame to do that landscaping in. Otherwise, they pay the money back. Rather than, because we
And then we
can't
said
go in
code
and tie into
enforcement
their
effort.
system and tie into their clocks and dig into their yards.
Well, we don't wanna maintain landscaping, so we're trying to think, would that incentivize them, you agree with that or not agree with that?
It's hard to put a park strip in there and then code enforce on them, saying we're starting to send you fines because you left it unfinished. That's, we wanna not say, look, we left you a vacant thing, figure out how you're gonna landscape it, and here's our code enforcement guy coming after you. It seems a little disingenuous to us, so the way we think we need to do something to get something going there once we give them fair plot line. That's
Or
a
just
thought.
give them time to,
You can,
In the 2-year window or whatever.
I mean, we don't pay for anybody else to put their park strip in, so.
Yeah, that's where my concern is.
okay, we were just trying to be creative and thinking, how do we solve, when we go talk to a property owner and say, we're gonna do this, and now you gotta spend more money to landscape this, and some of the areas aren't fully landscaped, they may come back.
But one could say that that is an improvement in their street, and again, I hesitate to do for some residents what I'm not willing to do for other
Right,
residents.
and I've gotten that argument from a lot of people who've watched these meetings and.
Let's
giving me
scratch that,
counter-arguments.
I'm writing no landscaping.
Well, that's just one person, I'm just saying.
No, I agree, I've gotten that from other residents saying, no, when we buy our house, we're paying those impact fees, we're paying for all those things.
Sure,
Why are we giving them a blank check?
It's difficult, because I think the other side of that argument, which I understand your point, I've had these discussions with Brett and back and forth on this kind of thing. I think part of the problem is these are inherited problems per se. And you have residents who've been here long before it was a city, because this is where they chose to live. They didn't want, to them, this wasn't an improvement to them, right? Because their improvement was open space, it was open fields per se, right?
But they
Not-
didn't own,
Huh?
but they didn't own that property.
Well, I understand that, for sure, but that's the, purpose of where they lived was to have that type of a feel in their life, right? Well, because they don't own the large pieces, what happens with the large landowners is now all of a sudden something is imposed on them. Now there's improvements, which the city is called improvements, but to them they're like, well, I don't want to be the city, I still want to be rural. And I understand that you don't get that unless you own all the property, I understand that. But it's like, it does create an impact to them even as far as lifestyle and things like that, right? And so we're like, okay, well, we will come in and we will, if you will allow us to come through there by donating, we will do those improvements because we understand that to you perhaps that's not an improvement, but to the rest of the city, because it's a city and we need to have these things, because that's part of being in a city, we need to have these things, we'll do the improvements if you'll donate the right of way. So I understand that part. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
It's just different because we're assuming that to them it's like a great improvement, but a lot of people it's not a great improvement. It's like you've again taken away more of what I loved about where I live. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
Well,
there's a
but their
large
destiny's in their own hands, because if they don't want to donate, then those improvements don't go in.
Right.
At least that
And the
seems
other
to be
thing,
the pulse of
other
the
thing that
council.
I'd say here is, you know, it's not necessarily fair to say that it was the city that took all this away from them. It was their neighbors that sold the land. It was their neighbors that all had to vote to incorporate. It was their neighbors that had to vote to annex into the city. And so, you know, based on, you know, size of property and all those things. So it's not necessarily the city that's come in and saying, we're trying to come in and say, you know, oh, well, you guys are, you know, we're just gonna come and do it because we want to. What's happened is everybody else around in the community has said, you know, this is where we wanna be as a community, this is what we wanna have happen. And so that's where they are now, and yeah, it's not necessarily what they would have wanted. I've got a lot of situations, you know, I've got, where I live, I've got a much different product than I thought I was buying into, but that's what happened when, you know, through the process, and it is where we are now. So not that I don't respect that those homeowners have a particular view, and it is in, like you said, in their hands where they can just not donate and nothing will happen. But I think we've been very clear. We were willing to do the improvement portion that we would normally do in any sort of these situations, but there has to be that.
But not beyond that,
And
not
beyond.
beyond.
Because we need to
That's
be.
the whole thing, at least for me, I can't speak for Nicole or anybody else, is that both sides have to come a ways, right? I mean, it's gonna cost everyone else in the city hundreds of thousands of dollars to put this road in.
Right.
In front of those homes, which we're willing to do some give and take, but the question at this point is to get it done, how far do you go?
Right.
And there's people on both sides, it's not just the people that live there that are affected.
Oh, I agree, and if it was only those people, and it is some of those people that are, we can't deal with this has created a huge traffic issue now on a road that never had that type of traffic, right? And so they're like, this is a nightmare. I mean, one of the residents is like furious about the nightmare of the dust and stuff. He's like, get it taken care of, right? And it's mostly the people of the new construction and stuff are like, fix this. We're sick of driving up and down this road. Fix this, get it fixed. So it's constantly, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but is not Gina and McQuiston a huge flag constantly on the complaint level? So these are two roads that are just constantly being complained about, right? So I
And
just
one
think,
was funded, which one was funded in years past?
We funded
Both, yeah.
So
So the city has attempted to fix this.
right,
multiple times.
right.
And to the mayor's point, I certainly respect that the people moved out there when they did. I moved out where I did, and lots has changed around me too.
Sure.
And that's been a project that I would say of not the city, but of the people.
Sure.
I don't feel like the city has done anything to the area other than respond to the request of the residents in the area. But to your point, the development I live in, the development Jared lives in, the mayor lives in, when we bought our lots in there, we all paid to pay for the road that actually went into our area too. And so that's where I'm, I guess, a little more reserved in how much extra city dollars I'm willing to spend on that. Does that make sense to you? Do I think that we need to try and get it resolved? 100%. Absolutely I do, but I think we have to be very responsible in how many dollars we allocate and how far we allow that to go in order to do it.
It sets a terrible precedent to start saying, we're gonna give you more money than we would have given anybody else.
And there's a thought out there, I've seen emails from the angry residents that watch us online, and the comments we make here, and they take that a little out of context, but they think we could have stopped that annexation.
Oh, yeah.
Once they qualify for all the criteria of the county, we can't stop it.
They come
That's
in.
what people don't understand, we can't stop them from annexing our city. When it comes in, we take it, we've got it, great, we've got it. But guess what, guess who didn't want it? For this very reason, because the county said they didn't have money to pay roads either.
Sure.
And if you wanted to have a reality, just go ask them. They thought, wow, when are you gonna take the rest of it? We don't want it, because it's a burden. It's a burden.
That's what I mean,
So-
kind of just in a matter of principle, at least previous council discussions we've had is if they're all willing to donate the right of way, that's them coming away, that's them putting some skin in the game as it were. Everybody else is paying for the cost of the road, I'm fine with that part. I really hesitate at throwing more money at them to say, here, do landscaping, because I mean, that's almost impossible to make sure it really gets done, use the right way, all those sorts of things, if we wanna have some kind, I mean, but at the same time, if you just give them extra time, I mean, that's the obvious thing to do, but I think there's a lot of people that would just you know, let that time expire, and then you still have the fight of, you put this in and now you're fining me for it. So I'd almost, and if that's an issue, I'd say let's look at the option of doing stamped concrete in there, or whatever, doing something that's uniform, that.
It's again an expense though,
But
and it's
there-
again
that's what I said,
something
there's
that we
gonna be a
don't do.
cost to
For anybody
anything.
else.
I'm saying if we're gonna put something towards it, I'd rather do something uniform that is the same, rather than just hand everybody a check and say, here, put some
The issue
trees
with
in, we'll have to-"
landscaping was tying into their system. So if we do stamped concrete, we have a standard to put trees in. So if we
Still
put
have to
trees,
tie
we
in.
still have to tie into their irrigation, so. We did do a xeriscape concept out on 7300 West, and we have a couple, well, at least one resident I know of that calls in often to complain about the look of it. So he didn't like it, but it turned out most everyone else seemed to like it, so.
But that's a point, is, I mean, that park strip, while it's city property, feels like an extension of their property. Everybody thinks the park strip is theirs. And so again, I don't think any common approach will work anyway. There'll always be somebody upset by what you choose to put in, and just, I go back to the fundamental concept of nobody paid for my park strip, or anybody else's park strip for that matter. So
then I have, no, I don't disagree with any of these things, it's just different feelings, right? So what about like existing improvements to their property? Like, I know there's two homeowners there that have nice pipe fencing along there for their arena and stuff like that. Do we set that back? Anything that impacts the existing thing?
If that's in the right of way, we will actually set it back and put it in.
And we take care, we pay for that in-kind
We pay for
stuff,
that.
right?
If we do give.
that's fair. I mean, that's
I
go
think
construction
that's
easement,
fair,
any
Yeah,
part.
we don't
of
just
that.
tear down the fence and walk away.
Okay, I just wanna clarify that.
I'll shut up.
And then I was told that there has been right of way that has been paid for by the city on Gina. Will somebody look in that for me,
We
please?
have, so I can look into it.
So we have done that. We have paid for right of way along Gina. The city has chosen to do that.
Yes.
So see, then it sends a different
And
message too.
unfortunately, we
Well,
gotta be
Gina's a
careful
totally different.
talking about Gina
kettle of
because we
fish,
technically
too.
didn't put that on the agenda, so we have to be careful about having that discussion.
Okay.
I'm happy to talk about it, I just wanna make sure that we're being
Well,
open
she's
to our
just trying
residents.
to
It's just an
establish
example
a
of precedent.
Yeah, just wanna make careful, cause it has to be equitable, you know, if we establish something, we say we're gonna pay you for this, we're not gonna pay you for this, right? And the other issue too, now if you're a new homeowner along a Gina road, and I know this isn't Gina, but just the same lines, that has been made to do improvements or pay for the improvements there. And now we go back and say, but everyone else, we're gonna give it to them. So how is that equitable? See what I'm saying? It just, there's like a can of worms, a lot of it.
And we'll never achieve 100% equity because clearly there's anomalies, as you've pointed out. But I think where we can be the most equitable with dealing with a challenging situation, all the better.
Yeah, so eliminate the Gina discussion, but on the McQuiston, it's just, we just need to work with the landowners. If they will donate their right of way, the city will come through with the improvements. They will be responsible for landscaping the park strip, is that what we're saying? And what else was up there, lights or?
So let me make sure that so the reason he's going through this list is we've talked to property owners to get right of way, and it's very important, we're very clear what the city does and what they do. So that's what he's going through. So the city would pay for the street lights, and would be hooked to the city street lights, just like a normal road. So that would be part of what we do. So the street lights is the city's, we would put in the drive approaches, we would be looking at, as Brett was saying, if there's a fence or anything, we would be responsible as part of our construction projects, the cost to put back in kind whatever they have. We would also have to look at driveways where if the driveway, we encroach, we may have to tear out part of the driveway even further back to get the right grade to come in. We may have to do some other things to make sure the drainage. So all those things are figured in his cost. And we don't necessarily need to go to all the detail here, but we wanted the council to be aware of it. So when we meet with them, we'll be talking to them on their property, standing there pointing to a stake saying, okay, this is where the road encroaches to. This is the grade we're going to be coming to. This is what's going to happen. Here's the impacts. This is how we plan to mitigate. Are you willing to donate the right of way if we do these things? So we just.
And really the only cost that we're asking is the cost that we ask of every other resident, and that is the landscaping. I mean, you're going to make sure everything else is improved and to the right slope and everything else. We're just simply saying, put in your park strip, just like we have everybody else.
What we would do too in our project is we would stuff sleeves under, because once we put our sidewalk, we don't want to bust it up for Jackson. So we would extend sleeves and try to get in a location that would tie into their water system. So that's always part of a project when we go into a residential area. So we can talk to them specifically about that. I had just I suggested to Blake to put in the money to pay for them, because we've also done landscaping for people, and then they always come back. We just were looking at, but if we're not putting the landscaping, then we shouldn't pay for it either way. So we're just taking it off the table. I just want to make our negotiations as easy as possible to get approval.
So, and is dryscape allowed then, or no?
The ordinance has
So
it,
they can dryscape or they can sod whatever their grass.
There's
whatever.
ordinance associated with it and has some tree elements and other, we would go through with our planning and tell them what they have to do.
Yeah, it can't be flat to zero or just hardscape.
Right.
It has to have a tree.
So I just kind of wanted to run through some of the property stuff really quick. So the red property is part of an approved subdivision already, and we'll be getting that property dedicated to the city when that development comes in. I don't have a time. I know they're working through their design right now.
So I'm gonna interrupt on that. So is he responsible for the cost of that then?
He pays for that.
Yep. The blue properties are properties that we'll need to acquire. Those are the people we'll have to talk to. The yellow property is also another property we'll have to acquire.
Now let's talk about the yellow for just 1 second.
There's no benefit.
The yellow guy doesn't live on the street and is not motivated in any way, shape, or form to have this road built. So everybody else other than yellow has a benefit to their property. He gets no benefit to any of his property. So I would suggest to the council that we go talk to him and see what can be done, and we would bring you back maybe an opportunity to buy that property. But if you say no,
This is just me, if all the others do what we ask, then I'm fine with condemning that piece.
Okay. He's willing to sell.
Hold them hostage.
Right.
Because
You don't wanna
guys,
put it
previous
together.
conversation.
But you also look at that property, he's gonna
That's
develop
why
that
I was
someday.
saying, I'm okay condemning.
He's gonna
That's
develop that
important.
someday though.
I think we heard a nod to go forward, so go talk to
The
rest of
last
people.
thing with the properties here is interesting. The two green properties are excess property we'll have to abandon or vacate. It's property that was acquired back before, which helps out this property owner quite a bit. 'Cause you can see how close that was getting to the house. We can pull that road to the north, that'll actually help out. We need some property from him and some improvements along there with the fence. So this could be a good swap option there. And also there's a little sliver there that is a give back and this is a take over here, so that makes those two properties a lot more interesting. One more interesting thing is the pavement ends right here, but these properties are already paved with, well, this one's paved with curb and gutter already, but owns to the center of the road still. So we'll have to.
So how does that work?
Well, subject to prescriptive easement.
It's a prescriptive easement, so it should.
We don't have to get, if it's already paved, in 10 years we own it.
We don't have to
There's
get it,
been
but to be
taxes on
clean, we could talk to them, but we don't.
We don't own it, we have the right to.
The thing is, if we wanna do full improvements, we'll need to get it with the
And
sidewalk.
we just put the sidewalk along those guys right there.
So after 10 years, we still.
We'll also run into excess property when we come around this corner in the future. Cause there's a gap there between the property line and the.
And the property owners on the north of the yellow, they were under the impression that they don't own anything right there anymore. So it will be maybe a little bit surprising to them that there is still a sliver there.
Yep.
Just FYI.
Tell them we'll reduce their property taxes, and all they gotta do is sign this document.
Sounds great.
So Blake has a meeting.
Lower
scheduled to
taxes,
meet with
lower
them.
taxes, look at us,
When is
we're lowering
it? When
someone's
is the
taxes.
meeting?
So that was the last item was the neighborhood meetings and one-on-one meetings. We're looking at April 3rd.
Tuesday.
But what we'd like to do is, I think it'd be good for Sherry to go, but we don't necessarily want to notice it with the whole time.
I think it's appropriate for sure.
And then we'll come back after those meetings, give you an update on where we are with the property, And then what we hope to have is a conclusion of this before we go into the final budget adoption, because then we need the 380,000, 82,000, whatever, to do the road, and that would be a budget element at that time.
For the April 3rd meeting, is that gonna be a general meeting with the people listed on this map?
Yeah, so
Or
we're
are we
looking
gonna
at
invite-
just sending these areas that are impacted.
That's what we wanna
an
focus on.
invitation to this.
As we should, yeah, I think that's.
Just a homeowner.
As I found on here, a couple of the homes are owned by people in other cities,
Yeah, there's
so
some
they're
that are owned
rentals.
by others.
Yeah, they are rentals.
So,
And actually, Justin Beck's, the ones right there, they actually front off of Gina, but they're still back onto the road.
So were you gonna meet with this individually first or within the group?
no, in a group first, and we had talked about, kind of showing this general layout, but then going property by property during that meeting, talking about what could potentially be done. And then from there, they can schedule one-on-ones if needed, so.
Yeah, we talked about it. I just think it's really important just for visual when you're the property owner to have exactly that, to say, okay, this is actually where your fence is gonna now be, just so in your mind you understand the full impact of.
What we'll have to do is we'll physically go stake the road to see where the new alignment is, where the sidewalk is.
You don't understand full impact till you get on site.
Yeah.
You see the stake, you see the elevation stake, it's okay, we got a back slope towards your house, we need to,
Yeah, it's just important to have that kind of conversation for them to understand the impact,
you can't, that's hard to do in a room.
for sure.
Okay, I think we had that discussion.
Whew, we're just cruising along
direction.
through,
This was gonna be the quickest one.
so item two
Yeah,
point
this is the
five,
quickest one.
is it really?
Could be.
Take it.
Okay. Item two point five.
So, we're gonna turn over to, Mike to talk about for a second, and I'll conclude with that.
So staff has been monitoring Doug Young's Olympia development proposal. He's been actively working with the county. He has submitted a petition for rezone. He's asking for a planned community zone. He has also asked for permission to go through a community structure plan. It's kind of a two-step approval process. He's hoping to actually process them in tandem or together. He hasn't submitted that second proposal yet, the community structure plan. But it's essentially a bubble plan, and as you can see in this presentation, he's there. He's already prepared that. So this is the area that we're talking about, 900 acres.
Can you put some reference points on there just for, like, 64 west one?
Let's see.
That's that red line, almost to the far east.
Yeah.
Left.
Sorry, there's 6,000, 6,400, Butterfield Creek down through here. And there is a map here in context. So you can see where Daybreak is. This is Doug's other project that we just negotiated.
This helps a lot.
Yeah, and then of course, the Danzy project. So he is wrapped right around the Danzy project on the north end.
Something about those.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's essentially his bubble plan. You can look at it a little bit closer. We haven't analyzed or studied really the project, but he's going to be coming to our joint meeting on the 29th and sharing with you what was presented to the county commission. And he has a video and a little presentation. But he is looking at the trail system, obviously the street network. We've had some initial concern that it tends to focus a lot of, it collects a lot of traffic onto this main spine right through the center. And then it discharges out of it, so it's gonna have a big impact on the city if this were approved. He's looking at right-of-way designs. So you can see he's obviously pretty serious about his petition with the county. We don't know.
When is he hoping for a vote?
Don't know yet. Don't know yet. We've met with staff. We've met with the staff planner who's working on this. We've asked to be kept informed of their future meetings. We've had one the March 14th meeting, where this was initially presented, one of our, Craig Evans was able to attend and take notes. But I'll be the main contact moving forward on this and watching this project.
There's no new meeting scheduled today.
Yeah.
And when we get into a meeting, we will have a staff member there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be there.
So I wanted to talk about a couple things that might help with some of the thoughts you have. No, I was gonna tell you some of the thoughts I have.
There you go.
And you'll decide if they help your thoughts. So he's presenting this here, and I think the elephant in the room is 8,500. That's big, and that seems extraordinarily high. However, I also want you to know that he's talking to a legislative body that's extremely sensitive to the housing needs of the county and the cost of housing. He's also dealing with a legislature that is super concerned about those same issues as well. And so I think there's a proper and a measured approach to address this, because if we go in there and we appear radicalized to these bodies, it will galvanize them to say, oh, we're really going to help him out with this development. And I'm not saying, you're gonna have to interpret all that, but anyway, so the point is, there's a need to watch what's going on. I believe there's infrastructure issues, I believe there's a lot of issues, and we'll watch this very closely and come back to you as we think there's significant updates.
Who provides the water?
That would be something I'd like to talk to you about in the future. So there's a lot of infrastructure. What's his name? Mike hit upon some of the road issues, some of the other things, but I think there is some things we're going to have to address as a council. But right now, today, every one of you and the residents can say stuff. One of the reasons he's going to the county, and he's made it really clear, is that they're pretty much referendum proof. Anything that gets approved by the city, he knows can be overturned at any time. And so he feels like coming through here, the legislative body can't guarantee him anything. We can't approve anything. But the county, because of its size and the vote, the signature you'd have to get, makes it.
People in the other parts of the county aren't going to care enough to.
Right.
It would be difficult. I'm not saying it's referendum proof, but I'm also telling you the amount of signatures you have to get would be extraordinarily different. So I just want to give you some thoughts of what's going on. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and I'd be more than happy to sit down with each of you and give you greater light knowledge.
I like that. Okay. With that, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
You just made the next city council meeting much better by taking 3 hours tonight, 3.5 hours.